Okay, so WalkMe, you fairly recently published a report with the title of The State of Digital Adoption 2024. I suppose the obvious place to start would just be a little bit of background as to why the need for it. What were you who did you talk to, and what were you hoping to uncover?
Sure. So I think this requires a bit of introduction to WalkMe. We've been around for over a decade, and we're seeing definitely more and more companies using and leveraging our technology. But a quick introduction might help for level setting. So if you think about it today, Philip, many organizations have a very clear strategy when it comes to measuring their digital asset, external digital assets, their website, their application, etc. But there is no clear methodology on how to do that with internal employee-facing applications. So we pioneered this category that we call digital adoption platform, and we basically help companies simplify the constant change that's happening in the workplace, especially with new applications introduced all the time. And we do that by overlaying on top of the application portfolio and providing insights into different bottlenecks across workflows, and then also giving the organization the tools to simplify and create a better experience on top of that with in-app guidance and automation, etc. And when we created this category, many organizations were not aware of even having this problem that we coined digital adoption. And they often came to us and just to seek our advice essentially. And we had many proof points from existing companies that we worked with, but when they asked for the source or when they asked for data points, there was no formal or official Gartner report to talk about these data points. And so we had to roll up our sleeves and go and do our own research on the topic. So we hired a research firm, and this is actually the third iteration of this report, the third annual State of Digital Adoption report. And this year's report is bigger and better than ever.
Okay, and in terms of the headline findings, it'd be good to explore some of the details as we go on. But at least to start with, what was the main finding or findings from the report?
So I think to me it was this notion of technology or productivity paradox, right? We every year we invest more and more money and resources on implementing new tools and acquiring new applications and technology in the workplace because we're hoping to become more productive and more efficient. But in reality, we're seeing that companies are still struggling with these transformations and they're still not realizing the full benefit of these technology investment. And in this year's report, we saw that this mismanagement of technology is actually costing organizations $1.14 million a week in lost productivity. And 44 hours, 44 days, sorry, of work across a large organization. So, again, we're investing a lot in technology, but are we really getting those returns on investments that we were hoping for? The report shows that we're not there yet.
Okay, and in terms of you sort of outlined that at the high level, but drilling down a little bit more in terms of what it uncovered in regard to attitudes to digital adoption. I mean, is it largely a positive thing? Everyone's aware of it and where they need to be, or are there still people nervous? Yeah, just how would you characterize the state of digital adoption, if you like?
So like I said, we're not there yet, but we're definitely seeing a positive trend. And, that actually, we see different indications for that. So 70% of organizations that we surveyed actually prioritized digital adoption as a KPI this year, right? Which is a massive increase since we started this report a couple of years ago, 3 years ago. And we're also seeing that they're putting the money where their mouth is, right? They're investing in resources and they're forming what we call center of excellence to cater to digital adoption. So they have a team of 5 or 6 people that are dedicated to thinking about the digital employee experience and the adoption of these new technologies, which is great. And we're seeing that we actually labeled 6 different best practices around digital adoption. And we see that some companies, actually the majority of the audience that we surveyed, 94% of the audience, did at least one of those best practices. And there was a very small group of 6% from the entire audience that we surveyed that did those entire 6 best practices. And we saw that those companies are actually seeing tremendous return on their investment and cutting costs and increasing productivity across the workforce.
And in terms of the downside, you alluded to in the headline finding that if people do it badly, then there's a significant negative impact. I'm interested that companies were honest enough, if you like, to put their hands up and say but just yeah, how is that? I suppose how is that coming about? How do they know that they're doing it badly, or is it when something goes wrong and then they sort of chain back and go, okay, we didn't do this properly? Just yeah, the state of the not so good digital adoption, if you like.
Yeah, I guess when you put a mirror to their face and ask them, you're right. They don't have a clear way to track or measure it, but when they think about it, they're thinking about things like employee attrition or customer retention rates, and they're looking at ENPS surveys, and they're looking at reaching their business objectives, and what they see is that they invest X amount of money in a specific tool because it was supposed to deliver some sort of business goal or outcome. And 6 months in, sometimes 18 months into that transformation project, they were not able to fully roll out that new piece of technology that they invested in. So 50% of those investments actually don't see any return on investment. There's an increase in employee dissatisfaction and frustration from technologies. We see people leaving their jobs because of, an outdated tech stack or a bad digital employee experience. So I think, that's how it manifests. That's how you see it in the workplace.
But I guess did the report also? I mean, nobody said we're going to stop our digital adoption program because we've had bad experience. So I suppose put it the other way, doing nothing, ignoring digital adoption, is not an option. So people have to embrace it and then make sure, as far as possible, that they're not failing in ways and with the negative impact that that causes.
Yeah, of course. Look, Phil, we've been sorry, Philip, we've been undergoing, this notion of digital transformation for decades now, and it's not going anywhere. In fact, what we're experiencing now is a new wave of this transformation, or AI transformation, if you will. Think about what happened since, technologies like ChatGPT were released a little over a year ago. It's just, wildfire. Everyone's trying to implement generative AI into the workplace now. So you'll see either native AI tools or just other tools that are enhanced with AI capabilities. And companies are investing a lot of time and resources and money to, implement these new AI tools. So essentially, we're going to go through this new phase of AI transformation, or, digital transformation 2.0. And we have to make sure that we're not making the same mistakes that we've done, in the first round of this, right? So going and purchasing technology, implementing software without having a clear strategy or even way to measure the outcome, right? Setting clear KPIs, making sure that it's being used the way it was meant to. And I think, that's you just can't ignore it. You can't go about this with the same traditional approaches that you had up until now.
Okay, and some of the report findings are interesting to find a little bit more. And you referenced, I think, earlier about the 44 days wasted and the cost when things aren't done so well. But I'm just interested in terms of employees. I think you highlighted employees waste quite a lot of time when technology is wrong. So what sort of things is that? They're either sat there because the application isn't working, or someone's got to go fix. Just yeah, how does that manifest itself? I suppose in terms of the time wasting.
Yeah, so I think I'll break it out into two parts, right? So first of all, we have to understand that $1.14 million loss in productivity that I mentioned at the beginning, it's a monetary figure that sums up the total impact of different factors, right? That are basically holding back organizations from seeing those efficiency gains and the performance that I talked about. It can be anything from lack of knowledge about available resources in the organization. So where do I find the right, report or article or support article, et cetera. It can be outdated technologies or processes, just old tools, legacy applications in the workplace. It can be inefficient support structure. Who do I go to get the right answer, right? Not just where or what tool do I use, who owns it, right? How do I make sure that it's up to date? You can create a presentation or create a support article and it's locked with a password. And when that person leaves the company, try to update that document. You need to create it from scratch. Can be, things like staff training or just generally speaking, a poor change management program. So, it's a culmination of all of those things. And we're seeing also, for example, that costs over 350 hours in lost annually per employee, essentially, just because of difficult to use software, right? Or, by the time I open a support ticket, especially now when people are working from home or in hybrid models, I can't just raise my hand and ask for help or ask my colleague to help with something. You need to open a ticket and you need to wait for someone to respond, et cetera, et cetera. And that time that is lost is, just it amounts to a lot of time and loss in productivity.
Again, one other thing that had caught my eye was this application sprawl. I know everyone says they want to try and consolidate applications, but I think the report uncovered, to me, quite a surprising fact that most organizations didn't have a clue how many applications they had in the first place. So yeah, just sort of
Yeah.
what's going on there. That sounds to me like basic housekeeping, but where's it going wrong?
Yeah, well, you're right. It should be, but unfortunately, it isn't. And I'll break it down into two parts, right? First of all, when we think about how we work today in the enterprise, most of the work is done on more than one application. So you can have different workflows and different business processes. For example, in the sales ecosystem, lead to cash, right? That one single workflow can span 14 different applications, three departments, different stakeholders, right? So people don't think about their business processes in terms of different touch points, but they only look at a single application. So for them, the sales tech stack is comprised mostly out of the CRM, when in fact there are, a dozen of other applications. So that's one problem. The second problem is really that visibility gap, right? Not being able to measure what you have. And that goes back to what I opened with, right? When it comes to our external facing digital assets and the websites and all of that, we have analytics, we have very clear ways to measure the impact, engagement, conversion rates, et cetera. But internally, we don't have the tools and mechanisms. So what happens is companies have some perception on the amount of applications and the different workflows that they interact with, when in reality, we know that they have almost 10 times more than what they think they have, right? So, we saw that the perception again was, using around 20 or 21 different applications, when in reality they had over 200 implemented. And, one of the main causes for this, and if you think about how we operated when COVID hit, we had to, we talked about business continuity, we had to continue to deliver the business outcome, but we didn't have, not all of the companies had a way to, immediately shift to remote working from home or remotely, right? So companies went out and bought every piece of technology they could, just to make sure that their teams could continue to operate and the revenue won't be impacted and the customer support won't be impacted. But they didn't stop to think, what do I already have? What capabilities already exists in my systems? And what you see is that there not only, many 10 times more application, but there are applications with duplicate capabilities and many, overlapping capabilities. So that's another problem. So the visibility gap is about the number of applications that you have, tracking and making sure that you're realizing the full potential of those tools, but also making sure that you're not wasting any, redundant licenses or, underutilized capabilities.
And I think the report also highlighted the need for digital adoption teams. And clearly there's, if you're going to go down that road, there's no doubt a team, but I think the report highlights that you need multiple digital adoption teams across the organization rather than maybe one heading up. I guess depending on how large the organization is, it varies. But just, yeah, I'm intrigued as to why that's important as opposed to having one sort of master digital adoption team. What's the benefit of having, several teams, if you like?
Right. Well, I think first of all, we need to acknowledge a huge milestone here for the category and for the maturity of enterprises, right? 5, 6, 7 years ago, if you would go out and ask someone who's responsible for this, who should own digital adoption, not many people would raise their hands, right? There's a lot of uncertainty, or lack of, ownership on this topic. But today we're seeing that a few interesting trends. First of all, we're seeing that digital transformation is no longer just the CIO's kind of responsibility. And we see that other C-level executives are taking ownership and responsibility, whether it's the chief HR officer or chief people officer. It can be coming from the operations and sales, et cetera. So first of all, this, the maturity and the organizational mindset is shifting, which is one good indication. And then, like I said earlier, it's also dedicating the resources and allocating the right people to get this done. So digital adoption essentially is about designing new experiences, and you can have different folks inside the organization that already have different capabilities. And when you assemble those into one group, you don't need to necessarily hire from outside, right? It can be a UX designer, it can be your L&D team, it can be a product manager. And when you create this, sometimes it's a tiger team or virtual team, other times it's a dedicated center of excellence that you assemble. But when you get these group of people together and you start thinking and you become deliberate about digital adoption and thinking about, why did I purchase this application? What good looks like, and how do I measure the success? And you start getting much better results from your investment. So as you mentioned, we're seeing an increase in those center of excellences and the teams around this. And we define a center of excellence as a team or group of people that have this as a dedicated KPI. Typically has around 5 or 6 folks on the team. And we actually saw an increase in a 68% increase in companies that have a dedicated center of excellence for digital adoption.
Okay, and you've already sort of highlighted the fact that there's a financial, if you like, penalty for not getting it right. But I'm wondering, did the report uncover anything on the other side? Is there a financial? Can you put your finger on a financial benefit for those companies that do implement digital adoption best practices? Is it obvious you do this and you potentially get this reward?
Of course. So those enterprises that have a mature digital adoption approach, or also known as those companies that are, we call them the digital elite in the report, who follow all those best practices. So they actually do see, I think the report cites $4.9 million a month as returns on reducing those costs. And when I talk about reducing costs, it can be cost optimization, right? They see 14% less on digital transformation projects that suddenly meet their desired return on investment. They see that different productivity improvements, like 18% higher ROI from different digital transformation projects and 30% higher application utilization, because there's a big difference between using a piece of software or a workflow and utilizing it, right? I can go in and out of a system all day, but not add any value or not, just read information instead of updating it, right? That's not utilizing it. It's just using a system. So once utilized properly, you'll see a 30% increase in the return as well. And of course, time savings, right? If you automate workflows, if you eliminate redundant steps or empty clicks, or put data validation across different forms and fields, you'll see that those enterprises save 3.3 hours a week and 21.5 days a year due to that improved user experience, essentially. So 4.9 million, but it's, again, aggregated costs associated to multiple factors.
And in terms of the overall picture with digital adoption, the end goal is something I've not heard it before. I don't know if it's a concept, but it's hyper productivity. So I suppose, are you able to outline what hyper productivity looks like? Or
Sure. So we talked a little bit about those mature organizations or the digital elite that I mentioned. And, every one of us knows that one person on the team that is really good with ChatGPT or with generative AI or really has a streamlined workflow, right? But how do you take that individual and, have maybe a team of successful or really knowledgeable people with generative AI and automation and all of that? How do you take that team and scale it to a department? How do you take that department and scale it company wide? So when you have that company wide mindset, That's an aspirational state that we call hyperproductivity. How do you take those successful individual and, kind of scale that across the org? And it has to come top down. And basically, hyperproductivity is that aspirational mindset to achieve significant increase in efficiency and output across the entire application portfolio that you have. So, how do you make sure that everyone, regardless of their background, age, digital dexterity, or prior knowledge, can achieve the same desired business outcome for the same tools? And that is done by creating a unified and consistent standard of work, right? And I'll give you a quick example. If you're in a company and we use Slack here, right? But it can be Teams or any other application for internal communication, and you get used to that. You get used to using Slack or Teams, and then you move to a new company, and they don't have that tool. They only use email. It will frustrate you as an employee. You're going to go and ask for it and beg your IT team to implement it because it created a new standard of work for you, and it's hard for you to operate without that. So achieving that state of hyperproductivity talks about creating a unified and consistent experience across the tech stack. So it's super easy to get what you need, just probably using natural language prompts and achieving the desired outcome. And once you implement that, that's a new standard of work, and that's what hyperproductivity is about.
Okay, and maybe just finally for those, I mean, I suspect everyone is on their journey towards digital adoption, but have you got any bits of advice, bearing in mind it sounds from the report as if there are significant challenges, shall we say? Are there any sort of bits of universal advice to give people as and when they encounter problems, or just to make sure that they've got a good plan that's going to give them the best practices that is the objective?
Correct. So first of all, I encourage everyone to download the report and read it. Like I said, it's the third iteration of this report, and if I don't, I think we did a good job. That's what I'm saying. So really, I encourage everyone to go and look at the findings in the report. But as with every problem that we have, the first step is to admit that we have a problem. And I really encourage companies to, take a deliberate approach to any technology investment, especially with software and different digital workflows that they implement. You can't just buy a piece of technology and hope that it works. There's a human element to it, and change is constant. If in the past CIOs and IT teams had years to prepare for a change, they would get a heads up from the software vendors. Today, change happens overnight, and it's constant. And we need a better approach to be able to deal with change. And I think implementing that mindset that I talked about is the first step towards there. So that's my advice to everyone listening today.
Okay, it's been great to chat. Some fascinating insights, as you say, and the report is great reading. So recommend everyone to have a look. But at least for now, appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Philip.